Welcome, welcome to Coming Home to You Sparkcast, the remembrance portal for mamas, mystics, cycle breakers, and leaders rising in their sacred truth. Here, every conversation is a homecoming. Every story is medicine. Every episode is an invitation to soften, to open, and remember who you are beneath the roles, the expectations, and the noise. So, because coming home to you is not a destination, it's a devotion, truthfully. And so before we begin, let's drop in together with our one breath, one heart ritual. So wherever you are listening, either today or in the future, place one hand in your heart and the other on your belly, in your womb area. In this space, I want you to inhale deeply through your nose, just letting God's presence fill your body and the light. And as you let go, exhale slowly, releasing all the burdens that you've been holding, all the weight that you've been carrying. And again, inhale as one breath, one heart, and one sister, circle of sisters. And as you exhale, land fully here in this moment. And in this space, let's do a joy spark moment of gratitude. So think of one thing that you can be grateful for today. Call forward a blessing in your life, a moment of grace, a reminder of God's goodness. And let that expand in your chest and ripple outward to all the women listening with us today. And this is a space, let's set our intention. How do we want to show up, be received and held in this moment? And in this field of faith and remembrance, in connection, we may begin. Mm. And so now, sisters, I'm honored today, special day to welcome a woman who has lived many lifetimes in one. She's been a teacher, a trainer, a national spokesperson, award-winning image consultant, corporate leader, artist, widow, mother, grandmother, and my mother-in-law, and a woman of unwavering faith. Tricia Smith has spent her life empowering others to see their own beauty, embody confidence, and show up with excellence, not from vanity, but from dignity, presence, and self-respect. And after decades of leadership across education, national beauty brands, corporate trainings, and women's entrepreneurship, Tricia now places deep faith, surrender, creativity, and devotion to the people that she loves. She's a sacred conversation. This is a sacred conversation about resilience, reinvention, identity, marriage, love, purpose, and remembering who you are, even after a lifetime of serving others. So welcome, Tricia Smith, to the Sparkcast today.
Margarita, my darling daughter-in-law, I am so delighted to be here with you and with all of your listeners. So thanks for offering this for me.
It's an honor, and thank you, and grateful that you were a yes. When I was thinking of how things happen for a reason, and this spot was always open, and when you were coming to visit us, she's actually here in the other room, everybody. We're here in person together, so it's an honor and a special treat, not just to have her on the Sparkcast, but to have her here in a space so I can squeeze her and share my things with her. So it's beautiful to have you here. So we're just gonna we always start with the deep root beginning, the identity, that faith, and the earth purpose that arises within us. And you live an extraordinary life of service, a teacher, consultant, and trainer, and a leading mentor. But before all the type of achievements, there was that woman that God was shaping within you. So when you look back now, what was the earliest invitations, the subtle whispers that began calling your purpose?
That's such a great question, and I've thought a lot about it. It's hard to go back to the very beginning, but I think I've always had an innate sense of God. I've just known He's there and that I am His daughter. My mom used to tell the story about when I was 3 years old. We had a white cat named Snowball, and the cat died. And mom tells me I walked around praying for 3 straight days for Snowball with my hands clasped in prayer, walking around the house, walking outside. And she thought I was never going to stop. So I guess I've always felt connected to God and to the higher power. So it's always been there. I also always have an innate sense and knowledge of right and wrong. So that was something that came very easily to me. In fact, I can remember so clearly looking at some of my friends who would have temper tantrums or be disrespectful, and I could never understand, don't they love their mommy? I would say, so that sense of right and wrong. And I tended to then become a teacher, even with my friends. And it was just, again, the essence of me. And I knew that really kind of from the very beginning.
So what I'm hearing is that from the beginning, you just were always a natural born leader and someone who had just a deep sense of purpose from the get-go. Would you say that your upbringing really nurtured you to be successful or leader? Or did you feel like there was a lot of pressure and you had to somehow either people please to survive or to keep up with your life as a young child?
Um, Yes, I mean, like every human being in the planet, you go through ups and downs. You have wonderful times and not so wonderful times. I was lucky enough to grow up in a really healthy family. Obviously, every family has dysfunctions, but my dad was a doctor. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. We had wonderful food, wonderful friends, lived in a beautiful home, lived right on the lake. So everything was kind of perfect for a long time in my life, which allowed me to gain a lot of confidence. I was always a really good student. I was always a voracious reader. I mean, my mom tells me that I was talking in full sentences at 15 months and I was reading it too. And I used to think she was exaggerating, but my daughter ended up being the same way. So I know it was probably true. Um, I was also both cursed and lucky to meet my life partner when I was only 15. Started dating Brian when I was only 15. And as wonderful as my family was, his was the opposite. And I'm going to just share with your listeners a little bit about his background because only then will they understand what became the greatest growth producing moment of my life later. When I first met Brian, he was what would you'd stereotypically say is the big man on campus. He was president of his class. He was president of the honor society. He was captain of all three sports. He was a gifted athlete, straight A student. And when he asked me out the first time, I was kind of surprised because I knew who he was, but I didn't know he knew who I was. But on our very first date, he unloaded on me about his childhood. He said, if you're going to go out with me, you need to know what I come from. And he began to tell me horror stories about his childhood. His father, ultimately, I learned, was a true psychopath. And his mom was very abused and beaten down. He was an only child. And he basically had no childhood. He became an adult when he was just a very small child. And he shared with me that at the age of 3, he made the decision that he was not going to be like his parents. He was going to go to college, he was going to make something of himself. And so it was so difficult for me to wrap my brain around how someone could come from that and become who he obviously was to me. The reality, however, was that there were scars and they just didn't show up until much later. We fell in love. We broke up a couple of times, got back together. And I'm going to tell your listeners something that's going to shock them all. Back then, in the mid 60s, you literally had to be married to get birth control. You had to be. And so we had been already dating for 3 years, and you can only wait so long. So the last thing I wanted to do is to get pregnant outside of marriage. So we actually got married at the end of my freshman year in college and at the end of his sophomore year. We were married through college. I had your husband, my son, 2 weeks after I graduated from college. And for the first, good 15, 18 years of our marriage, everything was literally fabulous. We were so happy and we had two wonderful children, great friends. And then the shit hit the fan, pardon my language. His dad basically did a true confessions right before he died and told Brian some things that were hideous, literally hideous. I'll give you one example. Brian never got 1 cent from his parents for college. It was all, we were still paying off his loans when this happened. He never got 1 cent for even a book, nothing. And yet we found out, we grew up in a very small town. He was kind of well known in town because he was one of the best athletes to come out of that area. And he finds out that his father, ever since Brian was in college, had been telling anyone who would listen that he was still paying for him, that he had a college educated son with 2 children and a wife who couldn't support them, and that he was still supporting us after never giving him a cent. So Brian had to face the reality that his father hated him, that he was jealous of him, that he had done everything in his power, to destroy his reputation. And it threw him for the proverbial loop. He went into a deep depression. He reverted and retracted from myself and from the kids. It was a horrible, horrible time. After a few months, he kind of pulled himself out of it. But it was at that point that each of us, when changed careers. I have actually had 5 careers in my life, not just jobs, careers. And evolution is an amazing thing, because if you had ever told me when I first became a teacher out of college that I would end up where I ended up, I would never have believed you. But the one thing that I've learned so clearly is that we grow and we evolve, and you need to understand that we change and we evolve. And so that what's right for you now may not be right for you 10 years from now. So we both left education. He was a teacher and coach, and he went into business, and he was so successful at it. He was a perfectionist. I don't know how many of your listeners have come from really dysfunctional backgrounds, but the one thing that they all have in common when they've been through those things is that they have trust and control issues. And Brian had no problem trusting me, but he had to control everything. And because they learn as a very small child that it's when I let down my control that I can be decimated.
Right.
So he became, and by the way, everyone who goes through that kind of a childhood ends up being addictive. It might not be to drugs, might not be to alcohol. In his case, it was work and cigarettes and athletics. And so he literally retreated into his addictions. We ended up being separated for 5 years, and it was incredibly hard. I I honestly don't know how I got through it. Even by the time it was over, even my own mother wanted me to give up on him. Everybody was, even the kids were trying to convince me to give up on him. But I knew who he was down deep and inside. I knew who he was. And it was just a really, really tough time. But what I really want to share the most with your listeners is this. I found when he first left, for the first 6 weeks, I had my own business. I was incredibly successful. I had friends, I had kids. And if you think of a wheel with each spoke on the wheel being one aspect of your life, I had made him my center. And when the center fell out, it didn't seem to matter what else I had. I was not able to, have any joy or satisfaction, even from being a mom or from my career or from my friends, nothing. And one day, after being in the fetal position every night for 6 weeks, one day I realized, oh my God, this isn't healthy. This isn't happening just for him. This is happening for me too. This would not be happening unless I was supposed to learn something from this. And
Mm-hmm.
so I basically embarked for the next 5 years on a self-help journey. I read every single thing I could find in psychology and philosophy to try to figure out, how did I, from coming from that kind of a childhood, make him my center? Why did I do that? How did I do that? What was missing in me? And so I tried everything. I
I
did a
love
lot
that.
of meditation. I was in therapy. I read every book I could find. I kept a journal that my journal literally became about 25 notebooks that are in a box still in my house, because I found that journaling really helped me to get in touch with myself through that period of time. And I'm going to share one more thing. One of the things I learned the most is that we all have strengths, And our strengths are the way we lead in life. But the overuse of our strengths become weaknesses. And I'm going to use myself as an example. Because I talked so early, because I'm very intelligent, because I was able to be successful at everything I ever tried to do, I relied on speaking and talking and was a
Mm.
terrible listener, which really was hard for Brian because he was just the opposite. He was a fabulous listener and took everything in. And that had become one of the issues that I was not really aware of. I just counted on that ability within myself for so long. And I know that you're probably chuckling right now because you're thinking, she's still not the greatest listener in the world. It's been a it's been a lifelong journey. I'm still working on it. Yeah,
Awareness is key. I give you credit.
I'm
Awareness is
still
key. I give you
working on
credit.
it. But
But what I love what you said because, really you guys found each other for that growth. His lesson was also to speak up, to
absolutely,
share his truth, to be heard, to take up space. But I love what you shared, and what I heard in there was so much resilience, opportunity for you to reinvent yourself, and that was the season that you were in. And I love that you actually did have that moment because you had that innate sense already since a child of right and wrong and a higher purpose, a higher meaning. And so that's you took yourself on and asked yourself the most important question: how is this working, happening for me in this moment? And there's that
yeah,
moment that's your rising spark. And because you've walked through so many career changes, like you said, and so much in motherhood and in leadership roles that you've had, all the business successes, and even the seasons of starting over, including the separation that you spoke about. And ultimately, that led you back to your husband, right? And to each other. What did those years, you kind of mentioned what those years taught you about your identity and strength and choosing yourself, but not from rebellion, but from truth. And I think what you said is that you were not at the center. So I guess what did that teach you?
it taught me that ultimately we are born alone, we're going to die alone. Every relationship we have between A and Z is a gift and has an opportunity for us to learn more about ourselves. But what I really learned is that I am, must be my own center. I must be that person. And every relationship I get is a gift from that. And I really learned that the most when I surrendered to God. It was during the 5th year of our separation that nothing seemed to be working. I was running out of patience. I had done all the work. Why hasn't he come home? And so forth. And it was literally when I got on my knees and said, God, take it from me. If this is not meant to be, then let it not be. And it was so interesting. It was only about a week after I did that that he decided to come home. And we really had 30 wonderful years after that. Unfortunately, as you know, I lost him 4 years ago. And it's been incredibly challenging, one of the toughest times of my life, because other than the 5 years of our separation, I really had never, I got married so young that basically had never really had to just be alone. And
Mm.
so that's been hard too. So I'm in that season now.
Mm. And so, what is those sacred tools that you have? Your relationship with God is really your foundation and your compass, which is your constant right now. And so, throughout all the pivots in your life, from education to beauty and to corporate leadership and retirement, those are all the seasons. What spiritual practices or daily rhythms, maybe principles that keep you grounded and steady in alignment with who you are in this season, learning to be alone and with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I find it very easy to be aligned with myself now. I think that's one of the things that happens if you're at all introspective, if you're at all spiritual throughout your lives, if you really do connect with God and that kind of a level, it becomes pretty easy by the time you're my age to understand here's who I am. If somebody said, "Who are you, Tricia Smith?" right now, I would say, "I'm God's daughter and I'm Jesus's sister. That's who I am." And every other thing in my life pales in comparison to that. The relationship that I have with God is everything to me. And I hope and pray that when it's my time, and I know I'm in the fourth quarter, that I hear nothing but, well done, my daughter. That's my hope and my prayer. I've done a lot of learning and a lot of reading and listening and researching about NDEs. Can I tell your watchers a little bit about that? I don't know if any of you have ever heard about near-death experiences, but happily, there are some incredibly wonderful books and personal stories of people who've been clinically dead with no brain waves whatsoever, and that have been miraculously resuscitated and come back to tell us what they experienced. And I highly recommend one book. It's called Imagine Heaven by John Burke. And it's probably the best of all of them that I've read. He, unlike other people who've researched this, went all over the world and talked to people in every ethnicity, every nationality, every language, and only put in the book those things that were consistent across all of those different cultures and languages and ethnicities and religions. And they all share pretty much the same stories, that immediately they had a life review with a being that was a being of light. That's the way they describe this person, this being of light. And of course, I believe that's Jesus. And they do a complete life review. And instantly, you've heard about your light flashing before your eyes. Well, apparently that really happens, that you do get to understand right away all the impact that you've had in your life, all the people you've touched, both negatively and positively, the ripples that went out from all of your different choices and decisions that you probably were never even aware of. And it's not judgmental. Apparently, it's done with complete and utter love, love that they've never experienced in any other way, any other time in their lives. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. I'm not the least bit afraid of death at this point in my life.
I love that you said that. There have been some people that I've also listened to and interviewed, and they have a remembrance of their connection to God. And they say that we have it all wrong, the way that we see and fear death. Like death is something that we're actually living life for, so that you, like you said, could go up and be at the pearly gates and say, "Good job, my daughter." Proud of you for being in integrity, being in your purpose, and leaving the place a better place than it was when you got there. And I think that's just so beautiful, and it's honoring the truth of who you are as the daughter. And this, I love how you said Jesus' sister. I was like, yes, Jesus is my. And I
Please,
feel like
please
we're
don't think
always.
for a second that I'm saying I'm perfect, that I've got it all
Oh
together. So
no, but we can't be perfect because it's like you said, it was in your darkest moment that you found the
yeah,
most profound growth and evolved into the
exactly.
that you were really meant to be and more
Isn't
connected.
that too bad, though? Isn't it too bad that we have to learn all of our biggest lessons through pain and suffering? It's really
Well,
true.
we only know that light exists because we have darkness.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I think that's God's way of just having us remind ourselves because if everything was perfect, you would have stayed at a place that was not truly
yeah,
profoundly going
yeah,
into the depths of that love, that profound. Like one of the things that I hear the NDE survivors talk about is the profound, pure love that's indescribable.
yeah, yeah.
And so, like, I felt like I lived 8 days in bliss, having that experience of heart openness where I understood that we were all connected on a level that I never thought I could. And so my journey is to get back to that place. My purpose from now on is to like, how can I be more of love, more of what is missing in the world? And this is why the Sparkcast is so important to me, is because it's stories like yours that really inspire others to say, wow, I'm not broken. And it's through the pain, how can this I sit
Yeah.
here in this moment and take out the gold nuggets that God is giving for me to be.
Well, the love that we get from God, you need to give to yourself.
Yes.
You need
Yes.
to give to
Start with
yourself.
you. Amen.
Start with you. Start with you.
Yes.
Absolutely. Because the more you love yourself and forgive yourself from your failings and your shortcomings, the more you have to give to others.
Hey, that's true. Amen. And speaking of others, the community bridge and the impact that we have that we get to leave behind. And you really spent your entire life lifting others, children, women, leaders, teams even, and families like mine, like me, and helping them step into their confidence and presence and especially their purpose. How do you actually see your lifelong work continuing to ripple out through your family and your community and even the people that you've touched along the way?
Well, the other thing that kind of evolves, and I have a lot of friends my own age, obviously, and we all tend to share the same philosophy at this point in our lives that there's no need to achieve anything anymore. There's no need to gather or accumulate anymore. There's only a need to take whatever we've learned and give back. And so I I'm a watercolor artist. I have that talent and I can barely find the time or effort to paint right now because all I want to do is give back to people. I volunteer at the hospital 2 days a week. I'm on the board of directors now of the hospital auxiliary. I'm very involved in the fundraising for scholarships for new nurses. And I've met so many incredibly wonderful people through all of this. Um, so it's a very different time for me in that respect. But you also realize at this age how fleeting it is, how quickly it went by. I mean, I can't believe how old I am. It's like, whoa, where did it all go? How? And you realize there were missed opportunities along the way. There were times when I wasn't as focused as I should have been on my path and on my journey and on myself. There were many times that I was too involved in material things and gaining money and so forth and you have to kind of forgive yourself for those things and realize that that's all part of the process too. We don't we're not born knowing these things. We have to learn them along the way. And um, again, I will point out the overuse of a strength becomes a weakness. So I would highly encourage the people watching right now to think about that. What are your strengths? What are your greatest strengths? There's a huge difference between talents and gifts, for example. Your gifts are the things that are effortless for you. Your gifts are the things that you are most able to share with others effortlessly. So understand those gifts and be absolutely open and aware that every day gives you an opportunity to share them in different ways. I I wish I could go back and do some things differently, but part of self-love is forgiving yourself for the times that you may have failed. So yeah. Um, and I guess if I could give any advice, it would be to just remember throughout your entire life, you're going to take 2 steps forward and then one back. Two forward, one back. Because it's not a straight line. It's not a straight line in any way, shape, or form. It's a bumpy ride. It's a bumpy ride and a circular ride in some cases. You'll find yourself having to repeat the same mistakes over and over again sometimes. And eventually, if you have any introspection at all, you get it. You get it like, oh, I'm creating this reality. No one's doing this to me. I'm not a victim. It's my choices. And so at this very late stage of my life, I kind of think of life as a series of choices with consequences. Every choice you make in life has a consequence. And if you can begin to anticipate the consequences, then you probably will avoid a lot of the problems and mistakes and hardships.
Yes, which is so important. And I think what I heard there was so important that's why it's so important to peel off the layers of that false identity and who you truly are and those gifts. And you just gave such practical step by steps. It's going to be a bumpy ride. All the things that I think, struggle with coming to terms. And I think the biggest thing and gift that you gave us was to forgive ourselves. Like just grounding in the forgiveness, you are going to make mistakes. It is going to be a bumper ride. You are going to make choices that are going to have consequences that you were probably not ready to have to face and have grace. It's okay. You just get to try again and learn from that and move forward. And I think that was just such a beautiful gift. And that's why I wish that our culture would really hold our elders more with the light of wisdom. You're the wisdom keepers of the world. And I think the more that we can value your lived experience, um, we would be in a situation where generational cycle breakers would have already been, having a whole shift in the way that we are right now in the world. Comes from responsibility and alignment and intention. So every choice you make with that in mind, you're always going to be at least in the path of your purpose. And
I'm so glad you brought up the word wisdom.
mhm.
For those who are watching right now, I'm sure you know the word, but do you really know what creates wisdom? Wisdom has two components: education and experience plus intelligence. So experiences aren't enough unless you have the intelligence and the sensitivity to be able to learn from those experiences. So over the course of many, many choices and experiences and consequences, you need to look inside. And so many of us rely, and I did too, obviously. So many of us rely on other people to make us happy. You know, I can't be happy with wasn't for the first 4.5 separation. I was miserable. Yeah, and my center had fallen out. Um, but you realize that that's not healthy. Need is not healthy. In fact, I went a period of need by definition healthy. Desire is healthy. Love and compassion and sexuality and intimacy, those are all healthy things. But is need healthy? Maybe not. I'm still not quite sure. What do you think?
Well, unfortunately, you were cutting out a little bit, but because I could hear you, you were pretty much talking about
Oh,
the difference between need and how you feel that need is not really as important as or okay, because desire is different, and a need can be like almost obsessive, is what I was hearing. Like, oh, I need to have that. As a mother, I hear my daughter saying all the time, I need that and I need this. I was like, you really don't need the 20th hoodie. Like, do you another hoodie for Christ's sake? Like, no, you don't. You want it. You desire to have another one because you don't have that color. And I love that you presence that the importance because words do matter. Words have a frequency,
mm.
and I think how you talk to yourself, what you say about yourself, really affects how you perceive your next decision.
I
Um,
was really thinking more, though, in terms of needing another human being.
oh, well, that too.
In other words, is it ever healthy to stake your whole happiness on another person?
Oh,
Mm.
no.
And so you see, I learned really fast that it wasn't
Mhm.
healthy.
Yeah.
And so many of us do that. We define ourselves as wife, as mother, as career woman, instead, so it's outside of ourselves, not internal at that point.
Yeah, and in the beginning of the Sparkhead, it always says who you are underneath the roles and the noise and the expectations.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
is oftentimes, and I find it. I think men do it as well, but women really do have more roles that we pack on, and we are like even there's a part of us so small inside that it's still us, but we like, well, we'll get to her later. I'm tired now. So
Yeah.
I love that you're saying it's really important to have you be at the core, have you be loving, falling in love with yourself, doing the self-care and forgiving
Can
yourself.
I share one more thing about that?
Yes.
Every woman watching and listening right now is a multitasker. And it drives you crazy. I know it does. When your husbands or your significant other can only do one thing at a time. Well, here's the truth, ladies. Scientists have proven that women have more connectivity between the two hemispheres of their brain than men do. So we can multitask and men can, which is so interesting. And so God made us this way. God made us to be able to juggle all those roles at one time and so forth. My kids used to call me the octopus when they were growing up because I was doing 8 things at once,
We
and
still do,
Brian could
by the
never do
way.
that.
Still do.
And so what I would encourage everybody to realize is that's part of your femininity. That's part of your reality. It's part of your gift. So don't get too uptight with your significant other if they can't do it too, because they really
You heard it here, folks. Just wanted to let you know she dropped the truth bomb here. Thank you. So, the season that you're in now. So, for all the listeners who feel truly connected by your journey and your story, what does life look like for you right now in this season? How are you creating meaning? How are you staying active, sharing your gifts? I know you mentioned a little bit, but I know
yeah.
there's more that you do. So, how do you, yeah, stay creative and with your family and all of that, sharing your gifts?
Well, I can't really talk to that without talking about my Catholic faith because I had left the church. I was a cradle Catholic, raised Catholic, but in my 20s and 30s and even half of my 40s, I fell away from the church. And when I decided to come back, it was a very conscious decision after doing a lot of research. I studied the early church, and I would encourage every Christian to do this. Study the first, second, and third centuries after Jesus' resurrection, and you'll find some very interesting things. Every single one of the apostles and their followers, for example, believed in infant baptism. They all did. The Mass of the Catholic Mass today is exactly the same sequence of events it was in the first century. Nothing changed at all over the course of those centuries. And of course, the Catholic Church has had many challenges. It's human beings who are, failed and flawed and so forth. But when I decided to come back to the church and really give it 100% of my commitment, it's made all the difference in my life. I'm very involved. I'm what they call a sacristan, which means I set up the altar and clean the altar after Mass. I'm a lector. I speak. I greet. I'm a Eucharistic minister. Um, I train the Eucharistic ministers. So I'm very involved in my church, and um, more and more every year, more and more. um, so happy there. So happy to feel that connection to my Lord and to really make it a center of my life. And maybe that's part of the evolution of life too. Maybe it is.
Mhm. That's beautiful. I also know that you were really involved with prison reform.
Yes, yes. Not really reform, because of my background. The one thread that goes through all 5 of my careers. I didn't really outline them for your watchers, but I was a teacher, then I was a principal of an elementary school. Then I left education and became an image consultant with Color Me Beautiful and did that for 12 years. And I was very successful. I actually worked in image in terms of color, style, body language, makeup application, hairstyles, corporate dressing, all of it, with over 17,000 individual women and over 500 companies. I wrote many articles that got published. I trained 400 image consultants across the country. So I did that for about 12 years. And actually, during those years, I actually owned my own store at one time too, in Portland, Maine, which I won't even begin to go through what happened with that during a deep recession. But then when I had to close that, I got a job with Avon products. At first, I was a divisional sales manager, and then they hired me to come into New York, and I worked in New York for 9 years. I commuted every week for 9 years from Maine to New York, and was an executive with Avon products and loved it, absolutely loved it. Then I was a VP of sales with 2 other image companies and direct selling companies before I retired. So but the thread that was through all of it was teaching. That was the one thing that was consistent through every one of my careers. And so you finally realize, first and foremost, that was the gift God gave me, as was teaching. Um, Through all of the corporate training that I did and the motivational speaking that I did, and it was always teaching. And I think that's something that if people can recognize what their gift is, I personally think we do a terrible disservice by asking kids, who do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to be when you grow up? I think it's a terrible disservice because you can't possibly know as a child what your intention, your destiny is, and how you're going to evolve and change over the course of your life. What you can, however, is help them to identify their gifts and their passions, because that will lead them in the right direction. So I think that's so important to do that with kids.
Mm,
So it's still I'm no different than I've ever been. I just am interacting in different ways. It's really the same thing.
that's beautiful. I love that keynote for moms. I think I have a lot of moms in my audience who could really, I think that was just a beautiful way to even just see your child for who they are and not who you want them, who you think they are. I mean, I think my
Right.
son, we see he has such natural gifts with soccer. I mean, he's an athlete. He comes by it rightfully. I think we're a family
Yep.
of athletes, both on both sides. And he's not interested in soccer for some reason. I don't know why yet. But it's okay. I get to not
Yep.
force him to do that. Maybe he's feeling something else and exploring a passion that he feels he's not more natural at. So thank you for gifting us that. And there's a woman listening out there who's still rebuilding her life right now, who, whether it's through loss, reinvention, or even divorce, perhaps she's going through a period of grief, a major transition in her life. What would you like to tell her about finding her strength again and coming home to God and herself and to the truth that she was just never alone?
Well, you're going to get my bias on this one. Um, I can't say that every person in the world is going to agree with this. Obviously, grief is a profoundly personal thing. Um, I actually, one other thing I do for my church, or I forgot to mention, is I actually facilitate a grief support group. And I have done it now 3 times, 3 different 10-week sessions. And the most recent one was the most difficult because in my group, I tend to have like anywhere from 8 to 10 people in the group, and we meet for 2 hours a week for 10 straight weeks. And it's a program that I developed on my own. I wrote the whole program, and because I have a degree in instructional design on top of everything else, so I wrote the whole program. And in this particular group, there was a young man in his mid 30s whose wife had committed suicide just 2 weeks before joining my group. Also in the group was that young woman's mother. So I had her mother and her husband in my group, raw, because they had just experienced it when the group began. So, in addition to that, the other people in the group had lost people months or years earlier. I had one woman who'd lost her husband for 16 years before and still had not moved on, So it's a very, very personal thing, grief. And I believe, and again, here's my bias, you don't get through it. You learn to live with it. How do I get over this? You don't. When you lose someone who is so, someone you love so deeply and desperately, and a child, a husband, a mother, a father, whatever, you don't get over it. You get through it, but you get through it with faith. You get through it with God. And surrendering to God at a time like that is the most important time in your life that you will surrender to God, because God is with us always. He's omnipotent, he's omnipresent, but he's with you more in your grief and your pain than at any other time. Can I share the miracle I had with your
Please, yes, we can all hear and have use more miracles in our lives.
Brian was not ever taken to church as a child. He was never taken to the beach. He was never taken to a lake. He had basically no childhood. But interestingly, in the last 10 years of his life, he became very devout, which I'm so grateful for. We shared that. And nevertheless, even though I hoped and prayed that he was with God in heaven, I found myself praying every day incessantly, I mean, many times a day, for a sign from God that he was there with him and that he was well and happy. For 4 weeks after he died, I prayed there multiple days. And about 4 weeks after he passed, I went to bed one night at 10 o'clock. And when I woke up in the morning, I looked at the clock in my bedroom and it said 4:30. And I went, oh, good. It's the first time in 4 weeks I've slept 6 hours. So that's good. I got up, went into the kitchen to make my walked through the kitchen. My peripheral vision, I noticed on the microwave in the oven that it was 4:30. It wasn't that I was looking for it. I just kind of glanced at it, grabbed my coffee, took it into the living room, turned on the television, and I happened to glance down at the cable box underneath the TV and it said 3:30. And I went, what? Because instantly I realized I never have to change that. That's always right. So I got up, went back to the kitchen, got my iPad and my iPhone. They're always right. I never have to manually adjust them. They both said 3:30. So somehow between 10 o'clock and 3:30 in the morning, the alarm clock in my bedroom, the microwave, and the stove were all manually adjusted 1 hour. I don't know whether it was an angel, God himself. I don't know. I only know that that was my sign. If you pray to God, he will answer your prayers, but he wants you to be persistent. I didn't get that answer the first time I prayed it. I prayed it every day for 4 weeks, and I did get my answer. I know he's there in heaven, and I know I will see him again. By the way, I have challenged atheists to come up with a way that that could have happened. Mm-mm. So it was miraculous. I can't hear you, honey.
I'm glad you had your prayer answered and that was your validation. And the message is simple. You pray, they are listening, you are being guided, and you are being supported.
Absolutely.
And just listen to the small whispers. And I think the more specific you are, like give me a specific sign that I will be undeniable that is a sign. Maybe it's a loud bang. Like the more specific you are, the clearer the sign is when it comes.
Yeah, you need to listen. You need to be quiet. It's, to hear God's voice, it's about surrendering and listening and follow. And you don't hear the voice, obviously, literally, but you'll know in your heart. You'll know it. Trust it.
Yeah, in the beginning, it does sound like your own voice. It's almost like
Hmm.
a thought that you had. You're like, well, why would I think of that? So
Hmm.
yes, and I get God does speak through whispers and through visual signs, always everywhere, and also sends our requests to us. You know, when I say it reminds me to have a sight of the bigger picture and not be so focused. That's how I interpret it anyway. Thank you, Tricia, so much for being here as we come to the last question. Already, I couldn't believe that the call is already over. I just wanted to say I'm honored again to have you here and for your beautiful wisdom that is applied intelligence and experience. I love how you bridge that together. It's beautiful. The more awareness that you have, the more that you can start to see how it's for you. And I loved all those notes that you shared. So as we close this powerful conversation with my mother-in-law, Tricia Smith, I'm so honored and blessed to have you in my life. Let this truth settle into your bones today, sisters. You were never alone. Not then, not now, and not ever. The connection you feel to God, to Source, to the light that has held you through every season, that is your birthright. That is your compass. That is the reminder that you are divinely guided, divinely protected, and divinely loved.
God bless everyone listening.
Mhm.
And God bless you for asking me. Thank you, honey.
Thank you. And you were born with gifts. You were born with the gift of what is right and true for you. And even as you grow, evolve, and shift and change, that inner light never leaves you. The world taught you to control, to grow, to micromanage your life as a way to stay safe. But today's conversation is your reminder that your true safety is in surrender. Surrender to God. Surrender to the goodness. Surrender to the truth that you are daughter of the divine, chosen sister, and a woman guided by beings of light who walk beside you every single day. With your whole heart. Your worth does not come from cheating, accumulating, proving anything. Your worth is in who you already are and what you choose to give from the wisdom you've lived. Life in a blink. Two steps forward, one step back. Spirals, lessons, grace, all of that works through you. And your choices shape your experience. Your choices create your reality. Your choices call you back home to you. So choose you, choose your joy, your growth, your gifts. Choose to forgive yourself from every imperfect moment. And choose to love yourself first, not out of need, but out of truth, because you matter, your heart matters, and your life matters. So show up for yourself in the way that the world learns to show up for themselves too. So something within you, if you feel alone, I ask you to please share this and subscribe to the channel because when you do this content really can reach the woman out there who still needs a reminder she's not alone and that her voice matters and that healing is possible for her too. Remember, you're exactly where you want to be. Until next time, sisters, keep rising, keep shining, because you matter exactly as you are. I am Rose, your host today with Tricia Smith, and You Sparkcast. We'll see you next week.